the War Room movie, which was apparently like a #1 box office movie in America, which I didn't know that.
I remember it was really popular.
I know it's very popular. My grandma loves that movie, but and we actually have a war room in our house because of that movie, which is.
I think you've shown me the war room.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. It's under the stairs. It's kind of scary, but
like Harry Potter.
Yeah, like Harry Potter. But at any rate, the lead actor from that movie had an interview recently. He's probably in a plethora of other Christian films and media. He had an interview and he said that if he had a penny for every role he's turned down, he'd be a, quote, gazillionaire, because he refuses to do anything sexual or anything with profanity in it because of his religious convictions. And I was reading recently, I've been going through the New Testament, and in Romans, I think it's 16 verse 19, it talks about why did I lose my train of thought here? It talks about being wise about goodness and being innocent when it comes to evil. And so I this interview made me think of that passage in the Bible, and I guess I wanted to open this to the floor of going, you hear that term about speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil, whatever. You know, the monkeys, they're doing this. And I was wondering if you feel like that is appropriate, like to not see evil. Because when I think of like, I don't know, like a police officer or something, they have to understand what criminals and bad people do in order to stop bad things from happening.
Yeah.
So they are in some ways wise about evil, even though Scripture tells us to be innocent about evil. And I guess when you go back to this movie thing, that doesn't correlate to a police officer per se, but I guess it's with your art or with your career or whatever. Are there bad ways that you can steer that ship?
So are you asking if artists and actors, etc., are they able to depict evil?
Yeah, I guess so. And for us as audiences, should we watch that and find something in it? And it doesn't have to be just with artists. It can be with any occupation, really, or any thing.
Well, I think that phrase where it's like see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, that's not in the Bible.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not Scripture. So I do think that it is acceptable to depict evil in media. It's just, what are you saying about the evil? Are you glorifying it, or are you presenting it as it really is, as evil? And like the example I think of is what you always say is your favorite movie, which is The Exorcist. And The Exorcist is a horror movie, and it certainly depicts evil, but it's a very clear-cut message about good versus evil and how good triumphs in the end.
Yeah, that's an interesting example, I guess. But I mean, I've even seen what was it? It was a song that my friend showed me. Connor might know about this. It's a Christian song. I don't know the artist, but he drops the F-bomb in it.
King's Kaleidoscope?
Yeah.
I remember when that song
The prayer
came out.
or something like that?
Yeah, my friend was saying how much he loved the song because it was so powerful and like raw. And I'm like, that's interesting because you don't usually hear any Christian songs, God forbid, with like profanity, especially like that, like a hardcore word like the F-bomb.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, that's an interesting thing.
We talked about that actually on the show
you?
Closer to when it came out. That was
really?
2018, 2019. But he talked about in an interview how his justification for it was that, you know, it was the song is a prayer to God, and that was he was at a time in his life where that's how he felt. And you know, in the Psalms, like, David doesn't hold back how he's feeling. I don't know how I feel about that, in the sense that, like, I get it. I get what he's saying. And I'm forgetting to switch the cameras because it's multitasking here. I get what he's saying, but at the same time, that's a very personal thing. Is that necessarily going to be edifying for other people?
Right, because you have to take other people into the equation.
Well, and I think that's really where we get to the bottom of this issue, is what is edifying for others.
Right, and I guess with this actor from War Room, as an actor, you're putting on a performance for other people to view. And so you might get some people with convictions about that, where they couldn't watch a scene in a movie where there's profanity or where there's something depicted that is evil.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was an interesting article, and so I didn't really know the actor. I feel bad I forgot his name.
This brings up.
Can I also say though the fact that he mentioned like sexual stuff being one of his criteria?
Yeah.
For me, that is an area where I do draw a line, like in media. That
Yeah,
I
I
consume.
agree with that.
Whereas if it's violence, if it's language, even if it's demonic stuff, as long as it's depicted as evil, because
Right.
demonic stuff is evil, and there's a
Right.
clear good versus evil story, I'm not necessarily going to say like, oh, I can't watch that movie. Violence, language, I don't have a problem with.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a way. There are stories where the sexual promiscuity or escapades of the
Well, you
character
can-
might
yeah.
actually be important.
Well,
And there's a tasteful way to tell that story.
Yeah,
and we have that stuff in the Bible too.
Right. But I also think there's so much media nowadays, especially with like TV and stuff like that, that's like borderline or just flat out pornographic. And like that's
Right.
what what's the word I'm looking for? Gratuitous, right? I think anything that's gratuitous is where I want to draw a line. Like if it's just violent
Yeah.
for the sake of being violent, it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
have
like
a story
excessive.
to tell. But like at the same time, there's some movies where like it wouldn't work if they didn't show the violence. It wouldn't be
Yeah, it wouldn't
realistic
be
if
the
there wasn't
same.
the profanity. You know,
And
I don't necessarily need to see nudity to be told a good story. So like I would say like the fact that he mentioned that specifically, I do think for me when it comes to content and film, that's like one of the only areas where I will draw lines as
Yeah.
far as what I watch.
Well, and that's like if you watch a movie where there's violence and someone dies, you haven't killed that person, yourself. Or if you watch something where someone curses, you're not necessarily using that profane language. But if you watch something sexual, you can lust through the movie. And I think that's kind of a weird case for how movies work. But then you even think of like Christ, like he was around some sketch people. And it's like, I'm sure he saw some stuff or heard language or whatever the case might be. So he didn't have that speak, hear, whatever evil mentality, yet, he was always constantly perfect. So
We can definitely be like, there's a tendency I think amongst Christians to be like prudish about it, to go too far, to be
Right.
legalistic. Yeah. Johnny, you sound like you want to
Johnny's
say
silent.
something.
No, I just think this opens two cans of worms, in my opinion. One, it reminds me, and the same way you don't know the name of that actor, I don't know the name of this director, because it was years ago, years and years and years ago. There was a director being interviewed, and he was a Christian. He kind of made an edgy movie, and he was explaining, he's like, well, the Bible's rated R. And I think it's kind of silly, to put it that way, because he's trying to be cool and like, make it relevant. It's like the Bible's rated R. And it's like, to one extent, I'm like, that's dumb. Like, why would you say it that way? To the other extent, I'm like, I understand what he's getting at. It's like this all this stuff, it's in there, right? Like some pretty weird stuff is in there. Like some weird sexual stuff is in there, right? So
if we applied the see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil to the Bible, how would that change the Bible?
Yeah, we
Without
probably
drawing
couldn't read it.
we wouldn't be able to read it. So it is. We do have to understand that, like, telling things, and it's a big part of biblical narrative. Telling things like they are, but again, acknowledging them as evil is a big part of biblical narrative itself. And so the second thing that leads me to is just, and I'm not questioning his convictions in particular, but I do sometimes wonder, and this is the broader conversation about the Christian movie industry, are we missing an opportunity to tell stories that are actually going to reach people outside of the faith by holding ourselves to certain standards, right? So there may be a film that has an incredible message about, Christ or just about concepts of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Donald Miller talks about in Blue Like Jazz, he talks about the fact like we can't help but tell the story of the Bible, of this like of a redemptive story, and so it just comes out in various forms of media. And so, are you going to miss out on an opportunity to tell a good story to somebody that may not hear it in War Room, right? But would hear it in a secular movie? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, and a lot of like the older, you have like the older musicals like Les Mis, and then you have even like adaptations of like some of the Dickens books and things like that depict some pretty tough stuff. And it's like those stories also have a lot of religious or faith undertones in them. So, so it is interesting. Are we just telling stories for our tribe? Or are we willing to, maybe step out? I'm not telling him what to do. I'm just saying it reminds me of that kind of dichotomy that's in the movie industry.
And that's probably why he's not getting a lot of roles.
Right. And if it's really that many, right? If he's saying I get $1 gazillion, you got to wonder if there's not a role in there that would have been redemptive.
Right. How rigid are his rules? Yeah. Is it just like no context? Like, did he like control F and like look up every curse word and just said, no, I'm not doing it?
Right.
Or did he read the context of it in the story?
Right.
So